Huh. Wonder why so many people are voting for Fresh. What the? Ah, I see now. Radical bro sans! At first glance, you'd assume Fresh Sans was just a really hip Sans that had just got 90s aesthetic confetti cannon blown up in his face, and well, yes he is, and also was, and he isn't. The most popular version of him at least, and Fresh Sans, before you get the pitchforks out, just hold on, I'll explain that point in a bit. Before I get into the 411 on this totally tubular skeleton and the Underfresh verse, like always, let's start with his origins. And just saying, anything that's established about him that isn't acknowledged by CrayonQueen herself will not be acknowledged in this, so no Underverse Fresh here. Bruh. Sorry, Underverse fans. And as always, if there's a specific part you want to get to, please use the timestamps. Beginning with his creator, Tumblr user Lover of Piggies / CrayonQueen / CQ. At the point of Fresh's creation, CrayonQueen was already a mondo figure in the fandom. Her Aftertale comic was still going strong, and Error's Tumblr debut was still barely a few days old, and he was already rising very quickly in popularity. Not to mention the ongoing Christmas Party AU series she was still working on that was also pretty well loved. She was kind of a powerhouse in terms of contributing new AUs in the fandom so early in Undertale's lifetime. And after ending the year of 2015 introducing Error, she began the epic year of 2016 introducing her new silly gnarly AU Underfresh on January 2nd, with a special focus on her sans design for it. He had actually been created during one of CrayonQueen's livestreams. See, a recent Gravity Falls episode premiered and introduced a new character that only had like a little over a minute of screen time, called Fresh, a totally wicked version of Dipper. People in our live stream chat were talking about him at the time, so CrayonQueen decided why not doodle up Undertale and a kickin' little 90s AU named Underfresh. And boom! History was made. Heck, Fresh Sans was even tagged as Sansy Fresh by her as a nod to Dippy Fresh for quite a few of her earlier posts for him. And of course, he was met with a bodacious welcome, not just from her fans on Tumblr, but even her other newcomer Sans. What the? While Underfresh was originally made to be an AU involving other Underfresh characters like Frisk and Papyrus, people instantly zoned in on and hyped up Fresh Sans. So much so that the fans took him and ran with new content for him faster than CrayonQueen could. And then in turn, CrayonQueen saw what they were doing with him and went, huh, that's actually pretty wickety-wackety dope, and took concepts from them to make canon to Fresh. Starting with his general concept, the first instance of Fresh's hashtag freshness being infectious, coming from a fan comic of him made and reblogged by CrayonQueen, and then having an asker bring up, probably as a joke, Underfresh not exactly being its own AU, and how it has now become a parasitic alteration feeding off the radness and swag of its hosts. Imagine bringing that up as a joke for silly Undertale Radical AU and then coming back to see what Underfresh has become. Also, first instance of a colored Underfresh art from CrayonQueen was having Underveil Sans infected with the Fresh, but you know, that's a phase. Next, his dope design. Fans didn't really have much to go off of with his prototype sketch, but knowing he was based on Dippy Fresh and the 90s definitely helped people think up their own ideas of what he would look like colored. One user that had a massive influence on Fresh's final design choice was Tumblr user called Private Mumbles. They had been a pretty active part of the fandom, creating art and answering asks as good old original Sans on a side blog called Determined to Pun, since not too long after the game's official release. And just a few days after Fresh's debut, an Asuka decided to warn Sans that the Underfresh AU was infecting AUs, and would you know it, bro gets Underfreshified into a design of Fresh that's really dang similar to his official colored one? Error fans might recognize this art style since CrayonQueen reblogged one of their posts on her Ask Error blog and did a fun impromptu role-playing collab with them. It's in this little RP sesh that establishes quite a few things about Fresh that just stuck. For one, the design. CrayonQueen took a lot of elements from Determined to Pun's Freshified Sans to fit into her official design of him, which we'll compare in just a moment. It also officially labels the freshness as something you can be infected with, and hinted that it can be removed, and also that it can also just remove itself. Also, another part of his design that I didn't realize was from the fans was his tongues, which will come in later, just bringing that up now while we're on the topic of fan inspirations. Anyway, let's move on to the official Funky Fresh Sans design, posted on January 13th, and pretty obvious CrayonQueen was already brewing something more with him just from the image. But talking about his design here, there were a lot of things taken from Private Bumble's version of him. So much so that I didn't even realize that Private Bumble's fresh design came first before CrayonQueen had colored a design herself, and assumed he was the OG. CrayonQueen would even officially announce that the bushy eyebrows that Private Bumbles had given Fresh was now an important part of his design from then on another art that she had made of him a few days later, which, yeah, those hairy caterpillars have been on Fresh's brow ever since. The other parts, I'm just assuming, like the text on Fresh's glasses being added and changing, and the absolute colorful fiesta that is his colorful palette. Obviously, that's the general, 90s aesthetic vibe, but you can't tell me she wasn't inspired by Private Bumble's design choice for him when she made her official version of Fresh outside of them bushy brows. Though, also to note that a couple months later, she would make a redesign to make Fresh look a little less Sans-like for copyright reasons, which I think is a pretty swag-tastic makeover personally. It was pretty obvious CrayonQueen decided to just go, you know what? Sure, we can totally work with this. On the silly virus spin on Fresh people were doing. Since the first 3 colored artworks of him definitely proved Fresh had a lot more to him than funky cool sand skeleton. After the little Private Mumbles RP session, it was basically made canon at that point that the freshness was something that possessed people, including the sands that he's in now. She then confirms that people who had been infected with it can be re-infected with it, and the fact that it can possess anyone at random. And on the post mentioning the second fact, she mentions wanting to make an RP blog and not wanting to name it Santy Fresh because of the fact that it can possess anyone. So would want to make it so the character you talk to changes when it does infect other people, which he does do once, switching to infecting Underveil Sans. It's from an Anon asked on February 5th that officially puts a name to this thing, a parasite, with her later confirming with zero doubt the freshness is a parasite rather than a virus. She confirms that he is his own creation with his own thoughts and personality, and in another ask, not too much later, confirming that he did have an actual form but she hadn't drawn it out yet, but she had an idea for its design, saying that it was not super funky, sick, nasty, rad. Or it was, depending on perspective. And we eventually do get to see the parasite himself and his, what's the diminutive of parasite? His parasite blitz? Which are his tongues. And they even have names, with CrayonQueen mentioning 2 of their names being Capri and Slinky. And yeah, of course he would name one of them after Capri-san and the other after freaking Slinky. And while he is just a little guy, he's also definitely something I would not want to be possessed by, ever. CrayonQueen also explains that he is in fact a pathetic little guy that has to rely on the manipulation and fear tactics, as well as the powers of his host's body to stay safe since he is complete weak sauce. He also can't talk out of his host's body and can only screech. Anyway, forget that. Look at this totally tubular bullying PSA that Fresh held, featuring Underveil Sans, released on February 7th, which also shows Fresh's ability to kidify any colorful language into family-friendly colorful language in real time, which is just a thing he can do, which even CrayonQueen doesn't elaborate on exactly how he does that. Also, Fresh subtly threatening physical pain to Fel Sans, but that's a joke. You know, typical Sans behavior. People were eating up this take on Underfresh. CrayonQueen rightfully predicting people would when she made an official comic of him. And honestly, it couldn't have been a better introduction comic for Fresh, I think. The typical 90s PSA that looks like it got double dipped in wickedly wicked 90s vibes just to have the ending hint at the other side of Fresh. Like how anyone who simply just saw a random fan art of him in the wild wouldn't really know what was lurking beneath the surface. And that's just chef's kiss. I would have done an actual chef's kiss, but you can't see it, so. And then she releases a few more Underfresh fun facts, like how Homeboy has absolutely no boundaries and loves getting close and personal with people, and how he will flirt with someone and then backtrack into a epic PSA, crediting Private Mumbles for that one. She then answers an asking what the deal is with Underfresh. Is there just a world infected with fresh parasites? And the answer? Multiverse. She explains that Fresh, which is who she was actively using for Underfresh, is actually the parasite that possesses people and turns them fresh. Not really Sans himself. But she does like the idea of a proper Underfresh AU like her original silly doodles for it, so decides that both ideas can coexist in separate universes. See, I told you I would address that. And well, Underfresh World AU doesn't really ever come up again from here on out. It's all about that parasite, baby! And also, a fanfiction made by a Tumblr blog called Underfic blog had actually given CrayonQueen a few devious new inspirations for Fresh. To summarize the fic super short, it focuses on the arc of the Ask Era blog where Swap Sans, aka Blue, is his captive, and Sandy Fresh comes to keep him company while he's lonely from Era being gone so much. Blue thinks they became friends and confides in him, telling him what Era did to his universe, which gets Fresh interested in Era. So he possesses Blue to use as a captive to get Era to give up his body to him. And Era does, but decides he wants to release all his captives first as a final act of redemption. Blue gets to reunite with his papyrus again, but the reunion is cut short when Fresh Era crashes the party, declaring his new goal to spread his good vibes across the multiverse, aka possess as many people as he can, starting with them. And Blue asks why he would do such a thing, asking, weren't they friends? Fresh Era simply laughs and says, don't you get it? I was just using you. We were never friends. As for why I'm doing this? Because it's fun. So yeah, I can see why this got her brain cooking up something nefarious for Fresh. And while I'm not 100% sure which parts of this fic inspired her and which she already had plans to put to use before someone else wrote them, those little inspiration seeds were soon going to sprout like weeds in an event that totally opened up Fresh's character in a way that honestly I wouldn't have expected from a freaking roleplay event. Which we'll be talking about soon, but for the few remaining posts before that, the Fresh blog was officially created on February 11th, letting all his new fans get to talk to the abomination himself. She also talked about her second art of Colored Fresh, explaining that yes, that is an actual monster soul in his eye and that said monster is not his, but it belongs to the host of the body he's in, and that if it's ever cracked, after a while he'd need to find a new host or things would get bad for the host. Then February 13th, 2016 came, and with it the announcement of Fresh's involvement in an upcoming Undertale AU roleplay event, Loveball, played by CrayonQueen herself with a wicked cool formal outfit for him. And now to explain what the Loveball event was. Hosted by Tumblr user Spider Speaks, a Muffet roleplay blog, with the Bone Zone 16, a Sans roleplay account as co-host, Muffet's Loveball was announced on February as an open invitation to any dedicated Undertale roleplay blogs, from canon to AUs to fan characters. Set to take place in, well, Muffet's mansion, and it was set to last from February 10th until February 14th. A lot of different blogs decided to participate, and fun fact, including Ink, who was played by Miyubi herself. And anyone from my Ink video wondering why I didn't tackle this for him? First, because the script was already getting super long as it was, and second, Miyubi mentioned it wasn't really canon for his character, so I left it out. That, however, is not the case for Fresh. Kind of. I'll explain that kind of later. And I'll be covering his side of the Loveball event here, which will be covered in summary because there was a lot of things to go through. And that's only going off of what CrayonQueen was able to save. The official logs for the event are just kaput, I guess. I couldn't find them anywhere. And so because I couldn't read directly from what was said, there might be some things that slipped through the cracks, but from the content we do have, oh boy, are we eating good with this one, boys? To begin with, let's discuss a few key characters in here, besides Fresh. The first and most important here is Passifrisk. Passifrisk is a Frisk roleplay blog based on the pacifist route version of them, and that's kind of all you need to know for this. Next is Bone Zone 66, which, where do we start with this one? Okay, so on the surface, he seems like your regular run-of-the-mill Sans, but he's actually based on the Underveil version of him. Or one of them, at least. The main one. So to super summarize his deal, this Sans was booted out of his world due to corrupt Flowey messing with the world he was in, the world they're in, and that causes Sans to have to force a true reset by getting Frisk's power by killing them and taking it over. He kills many versions of himself with every reset he does in order to get revenge on Flowey and then absorb the power of General Frisk to get the power of the Seven Souls. He decides to abandon his identity as Sans and goes by the Dragon. Then does one more true reset to fully remove himself from the world to continue without his influence. As he explores code and the multiverse, he discovers the existence of the players and the world beyond the Undertale multiverse that we live in, which leads him further into melancholy and depression. To quote his information doc, as of now, he stands vigil against threats in the multiverse potent enough to bring the attention of these mysterious creatures. His main focus in this endeavor? Contain or otherwise destroy corrupted Flowey so that patches, modifications upon their world imposed by those beings from beyond, have no need to occur. Also, another thing important to point out about him is that he doesn't have a soul. If I had a nickel for every multiverse protector Sans that doesn't see themselves as Sans and doesn't possess a soul anymore. On to the Loveball event. So for the highlights of the first beginning of the event, I'll be reading from the dandy summary list provided by CrayonQueen. Ahem. An extreme intense game of Uno between Fresh Sans and Classic Sans, aka Underveil Sans, where Classic won. You could cut the tension with a knife. Fresh flipping a knife in his hands before cutting a slice of cake for Passifrisk. Every single Fresh entrance into a room where he tries to do something cool but somehow slams into walls, tables, objects. An extremely emotional confrontation between Fresh and Passifrisk, where Fresh opens up about his true darker activities and Passifrisk is certain Fresh can be good. Passifrisk becomes Fresh's only real friend. The part where Fresh and two other Santas played music with kazoos for the whole ball. That part where Fresh was swing dancing with Underveil Sans against his will and dipped him. Fresh making people drop their card and have a good time until he shows up in the snack room chatting with his good buddy, Break Sans. For this next point, we actually have the POV from the role player who played as Break Sans, whose AU I couldn't find out more about since they deactivated the account. Well, anyway, while Break Sans and Fresh were chatting, Fresh lets it slip that he's actually a parasite. Break Sans, being naive and way too friendly for his own good, offers himself to Fresh after a little manipulation, lies, and then leaves his former Sans host there and makes a break for it. All in front of the other guests, mind you. Break Papyrus comes in to see his brother being controlled and finds Fresh trying to possess everyone at the party. Break Papyrus then decides he'll offer himself in place of his brother to Fresh, as long as Break Sans is kept safe. And Fresh accepts the new hosts willingly. Now we move on to the next phase, Freshmageddon. CrayonQueen made a very helpful post for the role players in the event to read through explaining what the deal with that was. It's revealed that the reason Fresh was even at the ball in the first place was to sort of inspect the people from the different AUs attending. After deciding that yes, he could possess all of them and use them to infect the multiverse with his freshness and have a relatively high chance for success, he spits out his parasites. He sends them out to infect as many people as he could. She then explains the goal for the other role players is to try to get rid of them all, but makes a note that the parasites aren't here to kill anyone. They're just here to spread the radical freshness around, bro. She offers 3 solutions to getting rid of them. Try stop Fresh by removing all the parasites, stop Fresh by somehow convincing him to stop, or stop Fresh by forcing him out of the body he's possessing, rendering him defenseless. And then on the official Fresh account, we get a detailed look on what happened near the end of Freshmageddon from the dude himself. It's a bit of a long post, and I'll try making a mega summary at the end, but basically, Fresh explains that he had been planning this out for days and producing tons of parasites to infect all the guests there. He also says he made some promises that he wouldn't infect Passifrisk or Tarma, who was an Undertale OC, and a few other peeps he had gotten close to over the course of the party avoided infection too. He was basically guaranteed an epic win, complete with villain monologue about how his good vibes would spread and infect every universe. Until Sans comes up to him. Specifically, Underveil Sans. He had been, like I said, the Sans that he had played Uno with earlier, and Fresh knew that he did not like him. As in, Sans did not like Fresh. Fresh hadn't been worried about him at first until he realized his parasites weren't trying to infect him. Sans knew Fresh wasn't a Sans, and Fresh had confirmed that he wasn't. That he was the only him in this event. Then Sans removed his jacket and triggered a load. That was when Fresh realized that this Sans didn't have a soul, which was why his parasites didn't detect him since they fed off soul energy. Then Sans explained the reason Muffet had made him the co-host for this event was because he wasn't a Sans either. Then boom! He transforms into his wicked dragon form and suddenly they're all in one of his pocket dimensions, which he can make by the way, that looks just like the Lost Corridor. Fresh had never been in the Lost Corridor before, for any universe he had been in, since he had always tried to keep a low profile, but being here now, his first reaction was thinking that, well, his party was over, that this thing was going to kill him. Everyone else, the other guests, stood behind him and he knew that they didn't deserve this, so he told them to stay back. Then the dragon's voice came from the door at the end of the corridor, telling him that he could hear the screams of his captives, asking if Fresh thought that what he did was a good thing. Fresh laughed, telling him he enjoyed hearing the screams of the souls he's tortured, and asking if the dragon was trying to prove some kind of point or trying to kill him. The dragon simply responded that those powers shouldn't be abused, that Fresh was dangerous for that reason, and saying he was slaving over something futile. And then he appeared, and he looked furious. Fresh tried talking his way out of this, saying he had hoped that they could be friends, and on, and as he talked, a Flowey appeared. That looked like an absolute nightmare. It was corrupted Flowey. It attacked, and was specifically trying to target Fresh. The dragon got the Flowey to stop, and the Flowey gave them a 20-minute timer before he would come back for them. Patsy Frisk tried walking up to Fresh, but Fresh snapped at them to stay back so they wouldn't get involved in this. The dragon then asked Fresh what he would do when he succeeded in spreading throughout the multiverse. Fresh responded that he wasn't out to end life, he was just out to save it, by ending all the pain that people felt. The dragon responded by saying that there's no way to end the pain of this existence. Fresh disagreed. This is where that cringy voice acting part comes in. Saying, "It's a lie. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. You all kill each other every chance you get. Some of you enter other universes just to murder more." And the dragon dropped an information bomb that would forever change Fresh's views. "I have looked just as you will look, as I will not destroy you here. You will be reborn and the cycle will continue as it always has. We are not the arbiters of this world. There is something beyond it, something far greater and terrible than anything we can possibly imagine." Fresh froze, his facade now broken. He asked what point the dragon was trying to get to. The dragon then brought up Gaster, how when he built the core, it was actually to go further than even the void, than the code, and emerge on their side, but he had failed. Fresh doesn't believe it, claiming nothing existed beyond the code, that the multiverse was comprised of zeros and ones, and that was what they all were, and that was it. The dragon tells him that no matter what they do, where they go, they'll never be free of this game, that something did exist beyond it, that he had broken through it once and spoken with it, that there were many of them, more powerful than everyone in that room combined. They created their universe, but he does not know what created them. Fresh asked why he was the one being told all this, and the dragon replied by saying that they were alike, and that Fresh needed to learn the truth, that his endeavor wasn't ultimately in vain, that all of them are nothing. Then the time limit ran out, and they had to face off against Flowey, which nearly gets Fresh and a few of the others killed a few times, but Sans helped them escape into a neighboring universe and defended them. As they were really about to die, a load option came up, and they pressed it, and poof, back in the ballroom, and Sans returned to looking like good old-fashioned classic Sans again. He praised their ability to have gotten through all of that better than he had expected. He then told them that once he thought he had all the answers to everything, and now that this incident was cleaned up, he wondered where Fresh would go from here. Fresh asked if all of it was real. Sans replied with yes and no, that nothing's real, and tells Fresh that he really doesn't want to get their attention. After finishing the recap, Fresh explains that he had been thinking things through, those inner thoughts he ignored or avoided listening to, and realized maybe he wasn't looking to help everyone and it was just an excuse. That he liked messing with people, that he liked the idea of him being clever or amusing, that he was better than the rest of them, and that he deserved to get what he wanted. And What he wanted was to mess with people and hurt them, and since he needed to possess others to live anyway, he might as well enjoy it. He wanted to take over the multiverse, but for more than a noble cause like helping people, but because he could, that it was fun and that he couldn't be stopped. He wanted the power to enslave everything. He realizes now he can't do that. He then addresses the readers of the post directly, asking if it was because of us. He says that we're the voices error on his Ask blog. Here's the ones he always talks about, that we're the ones beyond the code, the ones he was warned about. I think I'll read directly from what he said here for the full effect, because I don't think my paraphrasing will do it justice, and I'm gonna attempt to voice act this, so if you want to skip this in fear of cringe, please do. Please do. Okay. You're what he was talking about. Beyond all of my known existence, beyond the game, you're toying with error, asking him questions. We're all your toys. Every single thing I've seen, every universe, every single creature I've come across or possessed, every bit of data is something you're capable of manipulating, right? And now, I got your attention, just like he warned me against. You know, I won't stop, right? I'm gonna keep possessing peeps and running around and having a radical time. That's what you want, right? That's what you're looking for, to be amused and have a laugh. Well, you're in luck. That's what the Fresh is here to do. No worries, my good old chums. I'll keep it up. Everything. Right? That's why you're talking to me now, right? You're amused by me. Wicked, bruh. I'm glad. I'll just keep... I'll just keep up my dated lingo. I'll heely right into every situation and make a joke of myself. And then when peeps drop their guard, I'll do something creepy or hilarious, or both. That's what you want. That's what you want? Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Or worse, whatever you're capable of. I'll do what you want. I promise, just don't kill me. Please. This diddly darn event gone down gave this boy existential dread and anxiety. Well, we know things eventually turn out alright, since after the Loveball event, CrayonQueen left an ask on Passifrist's blog as Fresh, telling them that he was fine now, and asking if they were okay after all the crazy at Loveball, knowing that they were one determined kid, but that was all a lot to take in as a kid. He tells them he'd missed them and that maybe he'll come see them once he felt a little fresher. Frisk happily replies, telling him that they were fine and were really worried about him too. They tell him they hope he feels better and to stay safe, that they'll see him soon. Fresh responds, telling them that no matter what, the determination will be backing them up and they'll always make it out alright. He assures them that they don't need to worry about him, and he was still thinking about the events of the ball. That it sometimes made it a little hard to get up and get going sometimes, or all the time. He admits he isn't feeling all that rad, but he won't throw that at them. He just wanted to be sure that they were sleeping okay after the crazy flowy event. He tells them that if they ever need him, he'll be there in a heartbeat, and to contact him if they ever do need him for anything. And then, of course, people had to be absolute trolls, because after his post literally begging people not to delete him, people played into the powerful beings beyond the multiverse bit and just absolutely messed with him by telling him to keeping us entertained and not to get boring. With Fresh absolutely taking it like a champ. Yo, wow, okay bruh. Thank you for your clear and sincere concern for my sick, nasty brosif. I'll make sure to hide my clear and overwhelming fears and keep my newfounded, horrendous anxieties in check. Being aware of my clear and inevitable demise at the hands of creatures far larger and more infinite than I can comprehend definitely brings the mood down, yo. But I plan to keep doing what I'm doing. Nothing more fun than spreading the fresh, my main rat-tacular friend. Just had to spend a good long while all up thinking them deep inner thoughts and being all philosophical, you know, existential dread and whatnot. Nothing funnier than realizing you have zero worth and meaning in the multiverse. Life is great, dudes! Life couldn't be better! Okay, summary time for the Loveball event. Fresh attended the event, played around with everyone, participated in the party, but actually attended with the intention of taking over everyone there with his parasites. When success had basically been in his grasp, Underveil Sans put a stop to it by changing the room into one of his pocket dimensions, and then corrupt Flowey strikes and gives them a 20-minute moment of peace before he would strike again. Underveil Sans drops the bomb about the existence of players and the world beyond their multiverse, how compared to us, everyone there was basically nothing, which causes Fresh to start questioning everything about himself. Then Flowey attacks. They almost get killed, but manage to load a save that gets them back to the ballroom. Well, we don't know what happens immediately after, but Frisk and Fresh are on good terms post-event and even checked in on each other after. Fresh mentioning that he had been thinking about the events of the ball and how he was having trouble going through the day now and wasn't feeling too fresh but was managing. But this semi-sweet ending to Loveball would soon be followed by the mess that is Timeparty. So, the host of this party deactivated and I couldn't find any posts advertising it, and the logs for it that were shared have been deleted, so all I know was that it was some kind of multi-week event that takes place in a pocket dimension that I think was hosted by the host's OC, Timetail Sans, with the one that we'll be focusing on here being week 2 of the event, which took place around the end of February to the beginning of March, so I'm guessing February 26th to March 5th, or around the weekend area of February 26th. Take all of this with a grain of salt. I'm guessing hardcore for this. Anyway, the time party. Coming after events of Loveball means that Fresh is now starting to experience feelings as well as a dash of nihilism, which I think is the word for it. And going into the event, I have very little idea what happened between Fresh arriving and these next few messages CrayonQueen gave us to read. He probably just got up to some fun shenanigans before going out to the wings of the party. Anyway, let's get to it. Fresh looks up at the ceiling, talking to the them that Sans had told him about. Or rather, us. Asking if this was what we wanted, then wondering if we were unhappy he was talking to us at all. He then continues, asking if everything he's done has been entertaining for us, not realizing Passifrisk is listening in on his hysteric rambles. He forces himself to pull it together, that he's here to spread some good vibes. He tells himself, or us, that the Loveball stuff would just be a blip in his existence, that he's still the radical, persistent broseph we expect him to be. He knows he should probably go back out there, maybe entertain people or creep them out, but decides he needs a few more minutes, telling us that he'll be normal for us, that we don't need to replace him, that he doesn't need to be replaced. And then Ink just stomps on in, and you can bet I was pretty jump scared when this happened, because the tag read that it was Komiet, like the role player identification tag. But as it turns out, Miyubi had only joined in the next time party. And this Ink is a poser, so just keep in mind that none of this is actually her. So Ink comes in and he starts chugging milk, saying that he hates them for spoiling him. And then both Fresh and a different character called Roman asked if he meant them, and Ink simply says, yeah, you. Anyway, Fresh quickly goes back to normal, asking where they all came from and saying he was bored on his own anyway. As they're talking, Passifrisk hides further in the shadows, having wanted to talk to Fresh but now not seeing a chance with the newcomers coming in. Ink and Fresh chatted up, Ink bemoaning how he's having the worst day because of something involving chocolate, and Fresh responding that every day is radical for him, which, okay buddy, you're still suffering from an existential crisis. Let's not go too far there. Ink suddenly falls asleep, and Fresh comments that Ink is a little crazy. Then Passy Frisk steps out and Fresh greets them. They sit down in front of him. The two chat a little about the singing event held earlier, then Ink decides to make himself younger so he won't be tired, to the confusion of both Fresh and Frisk. He does in fact paint himself as younger, and Fresh once again says Ink is not all right in the head, but Frisk thinks he's funny. Fresh decides to play matchmaker for Ink and Error, and Fresh decides to play along. Ink also decides to play along with it, latching onto a very confused Error, with Roman joining in. Several questions are brought up about how drunk Ink and Roman are, and Fresh asks when will people realize the dangers of intoxicants. Fresh censors some squares, then causes Error to leave, carrying the still kittified Ink out with him. Now Fresh and Frisk are left alone, talking about some fun stuff Fresh could show them, like Men in Black and Blues Brothers, but he needed to make sure they were age appropriate first. Fresh suggests that they should probably be going back to the party since he's the party master after all. Frisk hesitantly says that a party's not as fun when someone's making you do it. Fresh pauses, then tells them this isn't the time, and that for their sake, it'll never be the time. Frisk insists though, saying that they want to be a good friend to him, and as a good friend, they won't let this go. Fresh's expression drops to a flat one, and tells them to stop. Then he smiles again, saying that he's fine and not suffering and was not talking about this. Despite being afraid of his tone, Frisk continues and asks if Fresh cares about them. They say they know he said he didn't have emotions, to which Fresh confirms, saying he's not supposed to. But Frisk asks, does he really? Fresh says he doesn't know, that he doesn't know what he's thinking about. He then tells Frisk that this can't continue, that Frisk has other people who care about them. Frisk stands and faces him. They say he should just make this easy then. Fresh, confused, asks if they mean make it easy for them to leave, and Frisk elaborates. Make it easy for Fresh to leave. To tell Frisk he doesn't care about them. Fresh once again tells them to give up, but Frisk continues, saying as his friend they love him and want things to be easier for him. Then they tell him to kill them. Fresh sighs, saying that Frisk makes him so mad. People who give up their lives for others. He questions how people like Frisk could just throw their lives away like that. He admits it would make his life easier if he did just end their life. That life was easier in the beginning and now nothing makes sense and everything was so unbearable. He never meant to make friends like this. He turns to Frisk, asking why is it that seeing them getting hurt made him mad. He wonders if this is how people feel all the time and laughs, saying it now made sense why people let him possess them. Frisk then relates to him, saying it felt like drowning, like you feel like nothing, and that no one would understand how much it hurts. Stunned and confused, Fresh asks if that was what this was. Fresh says that he has to be fresh and cool all the time, and Frisk denies that, telling them that he has an infinite number of options, because that's what life was, an infinite number of paths, and he can choose any of them. Fresh then says they're right, but all those options lead to 3 endings. Either he gets replaced by a better Fresh, someone he's made mad will come and kill him, or whatever is going on with him continues. He then decides that that last option would bleed into the other 2 eventually anyway, that he was going to die or be erased. He doesn't want to die or be erased. He doesn't want some other Fresh to show up. He wants to exist, and the closer he got to Frisk, the less time he had left. Fresh then says he shouldn't be talking about this since we, are listening. Frisk snaps, saying they can listen to this crap all they want, and Fresh quickly tells them not to say that he's done here. He again tells them they're ending this, since his survival is the most important thing to him, and now it seemed to be connected to Frisk's. He keeps telling them to leave, but Frisk continues to refuse. They begin crying, yelling that if he told them that none of this mattered, that if he was never happy with them, then they would leave. Fresh can't bring himself to say it. Frisk says that this whole thing was hurting them, but that hurt was good since it proved that they do care about their friendship, that it was real. And to quote what they say, "You are right. People with feelings, we love hurt. We're addicted to hurt. But that's only because without pain, you can't feel joy." Fresh is quiet for a moment, then lets out a short laugh and puts his smile back on, saying he's never felt joy or anything. But lately, all he's felt is anger and fear, only because he's seen it in others, those that he possesses and manipulates so he can recognize it. But only recently has he begun to actually feel it. But joy? He just played it out, like an actor, watching everyone else and learning how to fake it. To fake everything. He says he's not a good person. Frisk knows that already, but believes he has the ability to be a good person. Frisk wishes that Frisk could just change their mind. He tells Frisk to come over to him, and Frisk hesitantly does so and sits on his lap. The two are quiet for a long moment before Frisk hugs them, apologizing, and Frisk apologizes as well. As they're hugging, Timetail Sands walks in, looking over the scene in confusion, but neither of them notice yet. Fresh pets Frisk's head with one hand while reaching into his pocket with the other, apologizing that things had to be this way, that he thinks joy could have been something fun to experience with Frisk. Then, he pulls out a sharp bone created from magic from his pocket. Frisk looks up at him, calling his name softly in confusion. And before he can do anything drastic, Timetail Sands instantly appears beside him and grabs hold of his hand that was holding the bone, and asks with darkened eyes what exactly Fresh was doing. And that is all we get from CrayonQueen. There was supposed to be a part 3 finale to this, but she's never gotten around to posting it, so that's all we get. I did a lot of digging and found bits and pieces of what happened next. So after this fiasco, Patsy Frisk and Pillow Frisk, which is Frisk but a pillow, I guess, are hanging out with Error, and then as they're hanging out, something happened that causes Error to snap and take control of Patsy Frisk and make them slash through Pillow Frisk with a knife before going on to kill Patsy Frisk himself, despite them all having a bonding hug like an hour before. Error, what the actual? And Fresh had been there to see both deaths happen in front of him, and it tore him apart. He had just started warming up to the two Frisks, and now deaths that were supposed to mean nothing to him had him breaking down and begging for them not to die. After the two Frisks died, Error escaped, and Fresh had taken their bodies away with him. But good news! Both Frisks end up going through a reset like, Frisks do, and wake up alive in their individual universes. I would say alive and well, but Patsy Frisk was really torn up about not just dying, but having done the finishing blow on Pillow Frisk, regardless of if Error had been controlling them, messing with their head and making them feel responsible for it. After a while of recovery and support from their fans after a little Error scare, they eventually decide that they want to go to the next time party, mostly so they could see Fresh and show him that they were okay. As for Pillow Frisk, they seem to have come out of it a bit more well off, except they're suddenly jumped by a genocide version of themselves that ties them up and decides they'll be going to the next time party themselves. So time party week 3 comes along. And the only details I could find of it were from a Tumblr blog called Frisk and Misk. I'm just gonna say Misk. So huge thanks to them for noting down their side of things. Anyway, they had heard Fresh in the attic and went up there to find him and Pillow Frisk having an intense fight. And then I'd assume Fresh managed to win since this Frisk and Fresh went to the wings and played Go Fish with a few other characters, ate some snacks, and chilled. Then a ghost OC named Sophia began questioning Fresh about his host body, which Fresh deflected at first, but that caused Sophia to turn to insulting him and things started getting intense. Sophia had said she wanted to experience the high of being infected with Fresh without actually being infected, and that made Fresh mad. He had actually almost infected her but decided not to, which compared to him and Loveball trying to infect everyone, I think that's a win. And to make a tense situation even more tense, Pacifist walks in holding hands with Error. You know, the same Error who, mind you, made them kill someone and then killed them. Pacifist explained that they had forgiven Error and befriended him, but Fresh did not take too well to that. A fight broke out between Error and Fresh, and the Frisk that Frisk and Misk was role-playing as went to comfort Pacifrisk, and that seemed to calm the fight down. Fresh and Pacifrisk ended up arguing and their friendship kind of broke apart, causing the other Frisk to escape the scene, feeling useless that they hadn't been able to help the two of them. But outside, they noticed Error and Fresh talking, so they decided to try one more time to fix things and went over to talk to them. Then Error and another character managed to convince Fresh to go make things right with Pacifrisk, and the group went and found them. Fresh apparently gave a very good apology to Pacifrisk and Pacifrisk forgave him. And after they had, Fresh had even told Pacifrisk that he loved them. And hello? Just know that when I was typing this up, I was tearing imagining this scene. And also, making this clear, he meant love like the familial, platonic love, as confirmed by CrayonQueen. I feel like I have to make that very clear. Anyway, everything was now A-okay again. They had a group hug and had a killer dance party, and Fresh even freaking kissed King Metaton. So, all's well that ends well. No plot twist, all's well that ends well. Summary for the Time Party Week 2 and 3. Fresh goes to the wings and starts having a one-sided conversation with the beings Underveil Sands mentioned in Loveball, aka us, almost having a breakdown but forces himself out of it. Pacifrisk listening in on it. Then some other characters come in, shenanigans happen, and then Frisk and Fresh are left alone. Frisk brings up the issue, Fresh not wanting to talk about it, but Frisk insists. Then they have a very emotional talk that gets heated, with Fresh being confused by these new feelings of anger and fear and just wanting Frisk to leave him alone. Frisk tells him that if he tells them to leave, that their time together as friends meant nothing, then Frisk would, but Fresh couldn't do it. He then beckons Frisk over, who then sits on his lap. He says that he thinks joy would have been a nice feeling to experience with them, before trying to stab them with a sharp bone attack but was stopped by another Sans intervening. After that had happened, Pacifrisk and Pillow Frisk are killed thanks to Error, and it wrecks Fresh. Luckily, the both of them end up resetting back to their timelines, alive. Though Pacifrisk is rightfully traumatized from having been forced to kill Pillow Frisk, but decides to go to the next time party to see Fresh. Pillow Frisk's evil Geno counterpart ties them up to go to the next time party themselves. Fresh ends up fighting Geno Pillow Frisk, and I assume he won? Then he goes to play Go Fish with some partygoers. One of them goads him into almost infecting them, but he manages to stop himself. Then Pacifrisk walks in, holding hands with Error, explaining that they had forgiven him and made friends with him. Fresh is not happy about that and fights with Error, which makes Pacifrisk not happy and almost breaks up their friendship. Error and Fresh then later have a talk. Then Fresh is encouraged to go mend his friendship with Pacifrisk, which he does. He apologizes, Pacifrisk forgives him, and then he tells them that he loves them, in a familial type of way. That was a lot. But honestly, I think this is such a good character arc for Fresh, even if it was told almost exclusively through roleplays. Like I said, lots of Fresh was inspired by other people, now apparently so was his character development. Only complaint I have is how hard it is to find all of it and piece it all together. After having been exposed to the fresh development after the Loveball and Timeparty, obviously people had a ton of new questions about how exactly Fresh ticked, especially in the emotional department. CrayonQueen was more than happy to answer so we could all untangle this complex little life-sucking parasite. So I'm going to give you the absolute laydown on what and who exactly Fresh is and his thought processes, and I did my best to compile them all nice and ordered like in a sort of timeline, I guess. So Fresh is, simply put, a genderless, asexual, aromantic parasite that can't comprehend or experience emotions. Except for one, fear. Specifically, the primal, evolutionary, beneficial fear of death that drives any species to continue surviving. So whatever he does is for the benefit of his own survival, which leads to his inhabiting of bodies. Fresh, like mentioned way earlier in the video, is a weak being that needs hosts to protect himself, and he feeds on the soul energy of said hosts. He also learned seeming non-threatening was the best way to preserve his own safety, so decided to observe behavior that he could emulate himself. First, it started with using the same pronouns as his first host did, then behaviors. And the behavior he decided to stick with is the persona of him that we see now. Lots of smiles, silly language, bright colors, also other people didn't see him as a threat. And well, the 90s aesthetic was pretty perfect for that, so he rolled with it. But all of this is still just a ploy to keep himself safe from any possible harm, and beneath that, he's just an emotionless husk running on the need to keep surviving. While he can feel the senses that his host can, and can recognize their emotions, he can't feel them himself. Or at least he wasn't supposed to. CrayonQueen had mentioned there was a concept of him becoming more human if he stayed in one body long enough, but since he kept jumping from body to body, he isn't able to develop further mentally or emotionally. But as he spent more time with the others in the different roleplays he participated in, that slowly began to change. Loveball was when the real breakthrough on his psyche happened. At first, him scaring others, making them uncomfortable and hurting them, especially the Sams that he was possessing at the time, was like a game to him, one that he enjoyed playing. It was one of the little things he was able to feel, even as slight as it was. Him not being able to process what love or actual enjoyment was supposed to feel like. Even still, Passy Frisk, the odd kid he was starting to form an unusual friendship with, believed in him, no matter what bad things he did. And over time, he started feeling conflicted. He was starting to feel things for the people around him and couldn't describe it. Originally, he wouldn't even care if people he had no problem claiming as friends were hurt or killed in front of him, and had no qualms about possessing them the moment they trusted him, but it was different with this Frisk. He started to feel like he wanted to protect them, to keep an eye on them, and those feelings began to slowly spill over to the people that were close to Frisk as well. Now, he had never felt emotions before. Ever. So obviously he was frustrated and confused at these new feelings that would have no real benefit to his survival. And these new emotions were tested when another Tone Sans, had willingly died over and over for him, which made him feel furious that Tone would do something so detrimental to his own survival before Fresh himself decided to save Tone, when the idea of saving someone at the risk of his own safety was something Fresh would never have done before. Slowly, he was beginning to be capable of developing genuine friendships, and he couldn't comprehend it. The whole reason Fresh wasn't supposed to get attached to others or feel emotions like guilt or sadness was so it would be easier for him to manipulate others and use them to his own benefit. Friendship to Fresh was supposed to just be one big joke. That him possessing others to make them happy was just a joke to him, when in actuality, he was just being sadistic and enjoying the control he had over them, even if the enjoyment he felt from it was in his own extremely numb and limited experience of it. But now that he was developing actual emotions, well, it obviously completely rocked his world. In the bad way. Life without emotions was easy and simple, but Now, all these new emotions made one specific one rise above the others. Anxiety. Lots of it. Fresh doesn't like the idea of things being out of his control, and having emotions now was something very much out of his control. That loss of control causes that new anxiety of his to shoot through the roof, and he becomes very emotionally unstable since he has no idea what the frickety frack is he supposed to do with all these new feelings. He genuinely has no idea how people could have lived feeling these emotions all their lives like this. Having emotions that make him feel attached to others and wanting to keep them safe put a wrench in his plans on looking out just for himself, and that terrifies him. But hey, Timeparty shows that he's getting there. Also, in terms of romance and sexuality, since I didn't know how to fit it into the whole thing above, the fact that he's Arrow Ace is specifically because he's a parasite. He reproduces asexually, so he has no reason to be able to experience desires for relationships like that. But he sure has an interesting history when it comes to that sector of things. See, Fresh is a very physical guy, with zero concept of personal space. And that includes dishing out kisses like candy. He even has a notebook dedicated to keeping track of who he's kissed, including, like mentioned before, King Metaton, twice, and Tone Sands. But he puts absolutely zero actual feelings behind it since, to quote CrayonQueen, he understands sexual stuff the way a 5-year-old does, so he's pretty naive when it comes to that sector of things. But he also apparently experienced his first crush in a roleplay. Enter Timeparty Week 4, which we have some first-hand details of thanks to Ask Soultail Frisk, who so kindly made a post talking about their time interacting with Fresh at the party. It starts out pretty normal. Soul Frisk excitedly teleported in front of Fresh and finds out about him. Grace tells Papyrus is low-key, high-key racist to humans by asking how Fresh can interact with a, to quote him, pathetic human like that. Soul Frisk asks to be bros with Fresh. Fresh says he's bros with everyone. And Sophia, the ghost that had goaded him before, asks if that included her, and Fresh happily says it does. Fresh lifts Soul Frisk around since they're clinging to him, and Grace tells Papyrus asks how he, as such a fine specimen, could taint himself with a creature that like that. Then Fresh pauses and asks if Papyrus was flirting with him. And of course, wouldn't blame him if he was, and even tells Papyrus he ain't so bad himself. But then says it wouldn't work out though, and then drops the bomb that he's pretty sure he's already married. Or getting married. And the other fella doesn't know it yet. Like, hello? He also reveals that him and the mystery monster had clicked teeth, aka skellie kissed, like 3 times. When prodded more about who this mystery guy was, Fresh acts all shy about it and then reveals it's Greaser Sands! And to explain, Greaser is another 20th century decade-based skeleton, specifically the whole 50s Greaser vibe, made by Tumblr user at Radsea. And Greaser kinda goes against his whole kid-friendly 90s don't do drugs kids, cause drugs aren't lit vibe. That causes Fresh to freak out over these new butterflies in his, Do parasites have stomachs? And I'm still so mad I couldn't find this section of the party where Fresh develops a crush on someone. Okay. Everyone else had to do the honors of explaining to him that what he was experiencing was what we in the ex-elementary school biz call a crush. And then having to explain dating and marriage and then kissing is something that people can attach emotional connections to, which somehow did not click in Fresh's mind before this. And also, CrayonQueen says there was sexual tension between them. I have no clue if this was a joke or not, but I guess Fresh is then actually not completely like Arrow Ace, or he's just on the spectrum. But then again, this would all just be a silly concept, so I have no clue how canonical to Fresh this was supposed to be. Anyway, continuing with Soul Frisk's roleplay retelling, Soul Frisk says they met Greaser and thought he was pretty rad. Fresh practically swoons and asks if they didn't think Greaser was perfect too. After the two happily agree on how rad a couple Fresh and Greaser would be, Fresh decides to quote, "Heely away from these feelies," and rolls them over to the ballroom, and that's all we got. Also, CrayonQueen does later say that half of what she posts is just sugar honey iced tea posts, and even if the roleplays were great for Fresh development, and even if she does ship them, I think outright calling Fresh Greaser canon when she never really talks about them as a couple again that much after is probably something that shouldn't be said too confidently, you feel me? Though she also says that if he does become capable of emotions and attraction, he can be attracted to anyone or no one, so it's at least possible for him to be able to develop romantic feelings eventually. Plus, she had also said that if she were to write a proper story for Fresh, then it would be a lot darker than the pretty tame Greaser's crush situation that happened here. Speaking of, she had actually brought up wanting to make an official story for him, but the only problem was that, as confusing as Fresh is to us, he was just as confusing to CrayonQueen since even she had trouble pinning down his character sometimes. When she tries writing or thinking up something past his wicked 90s persona, it all falls apart for her because of how complex he is. She admits a few times Fresh is, in fact, one of her favorite characters and had really wanted to make a proper story talking about him without any silly posting, and the last word we heard about a possible story, to my knowledge, was September 24th, 2016, and well, if there was an official story, I would be talking about it right now. And also, let's keep in mind that all the roleplays, while a great way of delving into his mindset and psyche, were never completely CrayonQueen's ideal way of showing Fresh. So while I think referring to them for some kind of Fresh character development is good, I'm just gonna say once more to tread with caution when it comes to using them for any Fresh characterization you do. I mean, it's probably some of the most in-character Fresh you can get, but still. However, she did decide to add a version of Fresh as a main character into an upcoming platformer game called Willow and the Dragon Girl, which it seems like, as of making this video, she's still developing. She had said last July that she would be finished with it in a year and a half, so who knows? Maybe in 2025 we'll get to have our hands on it. Well, I mean, he isn't the soul energy-sucking parasite we all know and love, but a funky 90s-loving kid that the main character will be able to interact with a lot, so yay! More Fresh content! Anyway, to finish this section proper, I'm going to do something similar to my last video with ink by reading directly from CrayonQueen her thoughts on Fresh, in particular, in referencing to how people have mischaracterized him. Man, all the mischaracterizations of Fresh make me really sad. A lot of people are getting his character completely wrong, and it's starting to bum me out. I might have no choice but to write a proper short comic with him, because you guys should probably know. He's not a flirt. He's incapable of proper emotions, except for possible future character growth in my own stories. And he only smiles and acts the way he does because he's reflecting what he thinks are non-dangerous behaviors. Smiling, laughing, jokes he doesn't understand, etc, etc. Point is, although I'm super cool with people having fun with my characters, the stuff going on with Fresh concerns me a bit. The only person that has gotten his character right is at Elaine Aprana, with my guidance since I've helped her understand his character in Mama CQ, which is totally written by her. We just had to hammer down Fresh's character. He's not shallow, he has no clue what sex is, he has no clue what normal humans act like, and he has an extremely hard time comprehending people's thoughts, emotions, and feelings because, for sure, he has no emotions. He was not created with them. I know he doesn't have an official story out there, so it's easy to misinterpret him, but believe me, most people do get him completely wrong. And sometimes it does make me sad. I don't love Fresh because he's shallow and silly. He's actually rather complex as a character. But most people don't seem to bother asking me about who he is. They just sort of go their own way. And normally that's cool, except now people are interpreting fan concepts of him as real concepts of who he is, and that sort of concerns me. So please remember, most ideas of who Fresh is are absolutely inaccurate. I'm going to try and brainstorm a short story so I can give people a taste of what he's truly like. He's one of my favorite characters ever written, and there's a good reason for this. Again, just gonna say, I now get why y'all wanted me to cover him so soon after covering Ink. Fresh had never intended to become this uber deep complex character. Heck, remember when he was just silly 90 sans in the beginning of the video? But let's admit, we're totally thankful this is how he ended up becoming in the end. The idea for this Fresh is totally 10 times more radical. Anyway, onto the random Fresh trivia section for things that felt too out of place to add above. With how silly Billy Fresh is generally, most of these are really lighthearted, so there won't be any order to them. Well, actually, let's begin with the heaviest ones. Atsu Mini blog had made a comic of Fresh and Reaper Sans that inspired CrayonQueen to make one herself, stating that Reaper's body would be the perfect body for Fresh to inhabit. Like mentioned by CrayonQueen, there's also a comic series created by Tumblr user at Elena Prana that is CrayonQueen being the mom for Kid Geno, Error, and Fresh that had been worked on since April 18, 2016, and seems to have had its latest edition added on September 14th, 2022. I haven't read it yet, but CrayonQueen did say her interpretation of Fresh was one of the most in-character ones, so maybe consider giving it a read if you want to see more Fresh. Post-developing feelings, Fresh ends up getting panic attacks constantly and ends up yapping endlessly to prevent himself from panicking internally. Fresh avoids possessing humans because of the way his possession works. He has to fight against the host's soul for dominance over their body, and with how strong human souls are, he hasn't had any luck with them yet. CrayonQueen has made quite a few Fresh fight designs for other senses being infected with the freshness. Fresh is totally anti-weed, drugs, alcohol, all that, and thinks it's unradical. Because of that, even though his official birthday is April 20th, he prefers telling people it's actually April 1st to avoid 420. He thinks Fruit Loops are a top-class breakfast. Fresh owns a Furby named Freshbee McFreshbee the Fresh Furbra, and after the events of Time Party Week 3, he gave Pessyfrisk and Pillowfrisk Furbies of their own as apologies to them. Fresh has played Parappa the Rapper, and also he loves to rap. Despite having his whole persona being 90s, anything outdated and dumb is in Fresh's territory. Hence the YOLO glasses, despite YOLO not being a 90s thing. Despite his whole deal, Fresh would still be one of the funnest dudes you could possibly hang out with. Fresh's yellow tooth on his new design was partially inspired by Underveil hands, but mostly it's just there to make him look more like a dork. Captain Planet is his favorite TV show, with his favorite theme song being DuckTales. Fresh's favorite 90s anime is Sailor Moon because it talks about love and ended every episode with a moral. Fresh is a brony, and his favorite pony is, of course, Pinkie Pie. Fresh's unique magic is, quote, when he fights, he pulls Furbies out of his magical fanny pack, takes out a wiffle bat, and hits the Furbies at his enemies, and then the Furby explodes in a blaze of glory. CrayonQueen has made it clear that Fresh is not into error like that. Fresh, in his current form, is pretty tall, and if he had a body type, he'd be a thick, huggable boyo. Okay, so I don't really know what I expected when I started researching for this. I already knew Fresh was like a parasite inhabiting a sans, but I didn't expect to go on this whole roller coaster of discoveries. It's also funny to me how much of the Fresh we know now is thanks to so many outside influences. It only helped mold him for the better. Maybe Fresh is some kind of an unintentional social commentary on how taking the advice and ideas of others can in fact help mold you or whatever you're working on into something truly amazing. Or we could just see it as a whole bunch of silly coinkydinks. Anyway, thank you for watching this long. If you're from my ink video, holy cow, thank you so much. I've never had a video get that much attention before so quickly, and all the support has just blown me away. It kept me going through making the script for this video, because dang, did it fight with me. For the next video, I'll either put up another poll in my community posts for you all to vote on, or I'll pick an AU that catches my attention most. Please make sure to like, subscribe, so you don't miss out on that next video. But until then, take care, bro sips!